The Valkyrie High Command had a problem. Their newest warship, the Axiom of Supremacy, was a complete failure. They had spent 10 years building it. They had poured resources from 100 worlds into its construction, and now it sat in orbit above their capital world like a monument to their shame. Admiral Korvax stood before the Council of 12, his forearms clasped behind his back in the traditional posture of humility. The council members looked down at him from their elevated seats, their silver eyes reflecting the light of the chamber. "Explain," said High Counselor Vareth. Her voice was cold. "The quantum fold drive is unstable," Korvax said. "It functions, but we cannot predict when it will fail. The weapon systems drain power faster than our reactors can generate, and the hull alloy, while nearly indestructible, cannot be repaired with any tools we possess." "You are telling us," Vareth said slowly, "that we built a ship we cannot fix?" "Yes, High Counselor." The chamber fell silent. The Valkyrie Dominion had ruled this section of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They did not fail. They did not build things that did not work, and they certainly did not admit such failures publicly. "Destroy it," said Counselor Thrun from the far end of the chamber. "Melt it down. Pretend it never existed." "We cannot," Korvax replied. "The hull alloy resists our cutting tools. We would need to use weapons powerful enough to crack a planet's crust. The destruction would be visible across half the sector. Everyone would know." More silence. Then High Counselor Vareth leaned forward. "There is another option," she said. "We dump it somewhere. Somewhere no one will ever find it. Somewhere quarantined. Somewhere forgotten." Korvax understood immediately. "Earth-worth," Vareth confirmed. "The death world in Sector 7. Gravity to high, atmosphere to corrosive, native life to hostile. We quarantined it to centuries ago, after our survey team was killed by local predators. No one goes there. No one cares about it. The inhabitants, primitive, pre-spaceflight, they will not understand what they are looking at. And even if they did, they lack the technology to do anything with it. The ship will rust in their mud until their sun burns out." Korvax bowed his head. "It will be done, High Counselor." 3 days later, the Axiom of Supremacy was towed to the edge of Valkyrie space by a fleet of cargo haulers. Its systems were powered down. Its logs were erased, and then it was pushed toward the quarantine zone, aimed at the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. The Valkyrie watched it fall, and then turned their ships toward home. They had more important things to worry about than a failed experiment and a forgotten world. They did not look back. The ship hit Earth's atmosphere at an angle, which saved it from burning up completely. It screamed across the sky like a falling star, visible from 3 continents. It passed over Europe, crossed the Ural Mountains, and finally crashed in the frozen wilderness of Siberia. The impact was felt 100 miles away. It created a crater half a mile wide and set fire to the surrounding forest. Local villages reported earthquakes. Weather satellites detected the heat bloom. And within the hour, the Russian military was on high alert. Colonel Dmitry Sokolov was the first senior officer on the scene. He had been stationed at a base 80 miles from the crash site, and he had commandeered a helicopter the moment the reports came in. Now he stood at the edge of the crater, looking down at something that should not exist. The ship was enormous. Even half buried in the frozen earth, it stretched nearly a kilometer from end to end. Its hull was a dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols were carved along its sides, symbols that hurt his eyes if he looked at them too long. "Mother of God," whispered the soldier beside him. Sokolov said nothing. He pulled out his satellite phone and dialed a number that only a handful of people on Earth knew existed. "This is Sokolov," he said when the line connected. "We have a situation, a big one. I need to speak to someone with authority." He paused, looking at the alien ship. "All the authority, within 12 hours." The crash site was surrounded by a perimeter of soldiers and razor wire. Within 48 hours, the first scientists arrived, flown in from Moscow, Beijing, Washington, and London. Within a week, the United Nations Security Council had held 17 emergency sessions, all of them classified at the highest level. They called the Project Phoenix. Dr. Yuki Tanaka arrived on the 8th day. She was a propulsion physicist from MIT, one of the best in her field, and she had been pulled out of a lecture hall by men in dark suits. Who would not answer her questions? Now she stood in a heated tent at the edge of the crater, staring at photographs of the ship's interior. "This is real," she said. It was not a question. "Very real," said the man across the table. He was American, Air Force, with Colonel's eagles on his shoulders. "I'm Marcus Webb. I'm in charge of security for this operation. You're in charge of figuring out how that thing moves, how it moves." Yuki almost laughed. "I don't even know what it's made of. I don't know what those symbols mean. I don't know if it's a ship or a bomb or some kind of art project. You're asking me to understand technology that's centuries ahead of anything we have." "Yes," Webb said simply. "I am. Why me?" "Because 3 other physicists have already looked at the engine compartment. 2 of them quit. One of them is in a psychiatric hospital, convinced that mathematics itself is wrong. You're the 4th choice." Yuki was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up the photographs and looked at them more closely. "When do I start?" Moving the ship was the first challenge. It was too big to hide, and satellite coverage meant that every government on Earth would eventually learn about it. The solution came from Oleg Volkov, a Russian engineer who had spent 30 years fixing Soviet Terra machines that were never designed to work properly. "We don't move the ship," Oleg said, spreading his hands on the planning table. "We move the Earth around it. There's an old bunker complex 80 kilometers north, built during the Cold War, abandoned in the 90s. Very deep, very large. We dig a tunnel from here to there and slide the ship underground. That would take years." Someone objected. Oleg shrugged. "Then we work fast. It took 14 months. They used boring machines, explosives, and the labor of 6,000 workers who were told they were building a subway extension. When the ship finally slid into its underground hangar, the crater was filled with concrete and covered with artificial trees. Satellite photos showed nothing but forest. By then, Yuki had made her first breakthrough. "It's not faster than light travel," she explained to the gathered scientists and military officers. "It's folding space. The drive creates a bubble around the ship and then folds the space between the origin and destination so that they touch. The ship doesn't move. Space moves around it. Can we make it work?" Webb asked. "In theory, yes. But the Velthri abandoned this ship for a reason. Their safety systems shut the drive down at the slightest irregularity. Any fluctuation in power, any vibration in the hull, any deviation from expected parameters, and the whole thing locks up. So we remove the safety systems," Oleg said. The room went quiet. Yuki stared at him. "If we do that," she said carefully, "and something goes wrong, the drive could tear a hole in spacetime. It could destroy the ship. It could destroy the planet." Oleg nodded. "Yes, this is possible. But consider, they threw this ship away. They thought it was garbage. They thought we were too primitive to understand it. Maybe they were wrong about both things." He leaned forward, his eyes bright. "I have spent my entire life fixing machines that others said could not be fixed. This ship is no different. It is broken, yes, but broken things can be repaired. We just need to understand how they work." Webb looked at Yuki. "Can you figure it out?" Yuki thought about her career. She thought about her comfortable life back in Boston. She thought about the photographs of the ship's interior, the symbols that hurt to look at, the technology that seemed like magic. Then she thought about what it would mean if they succeeded. Humanity reaching the stars. Humanity standing among the species that had thrown them away like garbage. "I can try," she said. The months that followed were the hardest of Yuki's life. She worked 18-hour days, slept on a cot in the engine room, and filled notebook after notebook with equations that seemed to shift and change. When she looked away, Oleg was always there, bringing her food, checking her calculations, and telling her jokes in his rough English. "You know why Velthri abandoned this ship?" he asked one night, handing her a cup of terrible coffee. "Because it doesn't work." "No, because they were afraid of it. Look at their systems. Every wire has a backup. Every valve has a failsafe. They built this ship expecting it to fail, and when it did, they did not know how to make it succeed. They only knew how to prevent disaster." Yuki considered this. "And us?" Oleg grinned. "We are not afraid of disaster. We have lived with it our whole lives. Every machine we build, every bridge, every rocket, we know it might fail. We build it anyway. This is the difference between us and them. They run from danger. We run toward it. He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast to humanity. Too stupid to know when to quit. Yuki laughed despite herself. Then she went back to work. 6 months later, she finally understood how the drive worked. 6 months after that, she understood how to fix it. And 6 months after that, standing in the engine room with her 18 months had passed since the ship woke up. In that time, Project Phoenix had grown from a secret operation into the largest undertaking in human history. Over 20,000 people now worked in the underground complex, and the bunker had expanded into a sprawling city beneath the frozen Siberian soil. Yuki barely recognized the place anymore. New laboratories, new workshops, new living quarters, the construction never stopped. And at the center of it all, the ship that had once been called the Axiom of Supremacy now hummed with a different kind of energy. A human kind. They had renamed it the Axiom of Defiance. Colonel Webb had chosen the name himself. Late one night when the core team was sharing drinks in the mess hall, supremacy was their word, he had said, raising his glass. They thought they were better than us. They threw their garbage on our world and expected us to choke on it. Well, we didn't choke. We thrived. And when we fly this thing into space, I want them to know that we're not impressed by their supremacy. We defy it. The name had stuck. Now Yuki stood in the drive chamber, watching Oleg work. The Russian engineer had become something of a legend among the project staff. He could fix anything, understand anything, improvise anything. And right now, he was doing something that would have horrified the Valkyrie engineers who had built this ship. "You are sure about this?" she asked, looking at the bundle of wires in his hands. Oleg grinned. "I am never sure, but I am always correct. There is a difference." He connected the wires to a device that looked like it had been built from spare parts and prayers. It was, in fact, a modified nuclear reactor core from a decommissioned Russian submarine. The original Valkyrie reactors ran on clean fusion safe, efficient, and completely unable to meet the ship's power. Demands. Oleg's solution was simple: replace them with something dirtier and more powerful. The Valkyrie fusion reactors produce maybe 400 terawatts at peak, he explained, soldering the last connection. This beauty produces 1,200, maybe more. The ship's systems will have all the power they need. And the radiation? Oleg shrugged. We install shielding. We give crude dosimeters, is fine. Russians have been working with radiation for decades. A little extra never hurt anyone. Yuki was not entirely convinced by this logic, but she had learned to trust Oleg's instincts. The man had an almost supernatural ability to make impossible things work. If he said the radiation was manageable, it was probably manageable. Double quotes, power up when ready. She said into her communicator. The reactor hummed to life. The lights in the drive chamber flickered once, twice, and then burned steady and bright. On her console, power readings climbed higher than she had ever seen them, 1,200 terawatts. She reported to Webb over the intercom. Stable, all systems at full capacity. Webb's voice came back, tight with controlled excitement. What about the weapons? Yuki checked the display. The Valkyrie weapons had been designed for precision, elegant, efficient, and woefully underpowered by human standards. The original designers had calculated exactly how much energy was needed to destroy specific targets and refused to provide a single watt more. Humans had different ideas about weapons. The particle cannons are now receiving 3 times their designed power input, Yuki said. According to my calculations, each shot will deliver approximately 800% more energy than the Valkyrie intended. Will they explode? I don't think so. But we won't know for certain until we fire them. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Webb laughed, a short, sharp sound that carried more than a little madness. Good enough. What else? Yuki turned to the damage reports on her other screen. The hull had been the biggest problem. The Valkyrie alloy was nearly indestructible, which sounded like a good thing until you realized it was also nearly impossible to repair. Valkyrie ships were designed to be replaced, not fixed. When something broke, you built a new one. Humans didn't have that luxury. The solution had come from Dr. Sarah Chen, a materials scientist from Beijing. She had developed a nano-bonding compound that could grow into the Valkyrie alloy. filling cracks and sealing breaches at the molecular level. The process was slow days instead of hours, but it worked. Hull repairs are proceeding on schedule. Yuki reported. Dr. Chen says we'll have 95% structural integrity within the month, and the full drive? Yuki hesitated. The drive was the heart of the ship, and it was still the most dangerous part. The Valkyrie had included 17 separate safety systems to prevent catastrophic failure. Yuki and Oleg had removed 14 of them. The drive is ready, she said finally. But I need to be clear about the risks. Without the Valkyrie safety protocols, a malfunction could tear open local spacetime. We could destroy the ship. We could destroy everything within 100 kilometers. Could, Webb repeated. Not will, correct. My best estimate puts the probability of catastrophic failure at around 12%. Another pause. When Webb spoke again, his voice was quiet but firm. Dr. Tanaka, let me tell you something. In 1969, we sent 3 men to the moon on a rocket that had a 16% chance of complete mission. Failure. In 1944, we invaded Normandy with a 40% chance of being pushed back into the sea. Humans have never waited for good odds. We make our own odds. 12% is fine. Yuki wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. The Valkyrie had spent 3,000 years being careful, being safe, being afraid. And look where it had gotten them, throwing away their most advanced ship. Because it was too unpredictable. Humans didn't throw away unpredictable things. They rode them, understood. Colonel, she said, we'll be ready for the first flight test within the week. Word about the project leaked 6 months in. It was inevitable. Too many people, too many governments, too many secrets. The first rumors appeared on conspiracy websites and were dismissed as nonsense. Then satellite photos surfaced showing unusual activity in Siberia. Then a whistleblower sent documents to a major newspaper. Within days, the whole world knew. The reaction was chaos. Religious leaders declared it the end times. Stock markets crashed and recovered and crashed again. Protests erupted in major cities, some demanding that the ship be shared with all humanity, others demanding that it be destroyed before it brought destruction upon them. And in the halls of power, the arguments were even worse. This is Russian territory. The Russian ambassador declared it an emergency UN session. The ship belongs to Russia. The ship crashed on Earth. The American Secretary of State countered. It belongs to humanity. Humanity cannot agree on anything, the Chinese delegate pointed out. How will we decide who controls it? The arguments went on for weeks. Nations threatened each other. Alliances formed and dissolved. For a terrible moment, it seemed like the discovery of alien life might trigger World War III. Colonel Webb watched the chaos from the underground complex. His face grim. They're going to tear themselves apart, he said to Yuki during a late-night meeting. They're so busy fighting over the ship that they've forgotten what it means. We're not alone in the universe. There are civilizations out there that treated us like garbage. And instead of preparing for that, we're squabbling over territory. What can we do? Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders. We take it away from them, he said. All of them. The ship doesn't belong to Russia or America or China. It belongs to Earth. And we're going to make sure everyone understands that. It took 3 months of brutal negotiations, but in the end, Webb got his way. The Axiom of Defiance would be operated by an international crew, answering to a council of representatives from every major nation. No single country would have control. No single ideology would dominate. For the first time in history, humanity would fly as one. The crew selection was nearly as contentious as the political negotiations. Every nation wanted their people on the ship. Every military wanted their officers in command. Every scientist wanted their colleagues running the laboratories. In the end, the core crew numbered 87, 15 nations, 32 specialties, and exactly 0 agreement on how things should be done. Yuki was placed in charge of engineering, a position she had neither wanted nor asked for. Webb became the overall commander, mostly because no one could agree on anyone else. And Oleg, to no one's surprise, refused any official title at all. Titles are for politicians. He said when asked, I am an engineer. I fix things. That is enough. The rest of the crew was equally unusual. There were fighter pilots and submarine commanders, physicists and biologists, linguists and computer scientists. There were veterans of 3 different wars and pacifists who had never held a weapon. There were optimists who believed they were about to change the universe and pessimists who were certain they were about to die. They spent months training together, learning the ship's systems, practicing emergency procedures, and slowly learning to work as a team. It was not easy. Old rivalries and national tensions simmered just below the surface. Arguments broke out constantly. At one point, the American and Chinese contingents refused to speak to each other for a week. But slowly, something changed. They stopped seeing each other as Americans or Russians or Chinese. They started seeing each other as crew, as colleagues, as friends. Yuki noticed it first during a repair drill, when a German engineer and a Japanese technician worked together to fix a simulated hull breach. They didn't speak the same land. Axiom of defiance hung in the darkness between stars, spinning slowly from the violence of its first fold. Inside, half the crew was unconscious. The other half wished they were. Yuki pulled herself up from the floor of the engine room, her head pounding and her stomach threatening to reject everything she had eaten in the last week. The fold had been nothing like the simulations. The simulations had been smooth, elegant, almost peaceful. The reality had been like being turned inside out and stuffed back together. Wrong. Status report. She croaked into her communicator. Anyone alive? Oleg's voice came back, rough but steady. Engine room is functional. Drive is offline, but not damaged. We need maybe 2 hours to restart. Bridge here. That was Webb, sounding as bad as Yuki felt. Navigation is scrambled, but we're working on it. Sensors show we're approximately where we plan to be. Medical reports 12 crew members unconscious, no serious injuries. Yuki closed her eyes and let out a long breath. They had survived. The ship had survived. The fold drive, despite all her fears, had not torn them apart. That was terrible, she said. We need to fix the stabilization systems before we fold again. Agreed. But first, let's figure out where we are. The crew spent the next 6 hours recovering and recalibrating. The fold had deposited them near a red dwarf star designated HD 119,134, about 21 light-years from Earth. The star had several planets, but none of them showed signs of life or civilization. They were alone, or so they thought. The first sign of trouble came when Lieutenant Park, the Korean sensor operator, noticed something strange in her readings. Commander Webb, she said, her voice carefully controlled. I'm detecting an energy signature approximately 800,000 kilometers from our position. It's consistent with Veltri power systems. The bridge went silent. Webb walked slowly to her station and looked at the screen. Can you identify it? It appears to be a patrol vessel. Small, maybe 50 meters long. It's not moving toward us, but it's definitely scanning the area. Webb's jaw tightened. They must have detected our fold. The energy signature would be distinctive to anyone who knew what to look for. What do we do? Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders. We introduce ourselves, Sub-Commander. Threx of the Veltri Patrol Corps was having a very boring day until the impossible happened. He had been assigned to monitor the sector for 3 years, now a punishment. Posting for an incident he preferred not to discuss. Nothing ever happened here. The quarantine zone was dead, the surrounding systems were empty, and his duties consisted mainly of filing reports that no one read. Then his sensors had screamed an alert that made no sense. Quantum fold signature detected. His navigation officer reported, his voice trembling. Bearing mark 73. It's one of ours, sir. That's impossible. There are no Veltri vessels in this sector. I know, sir. But the signature is unmistakable. It's a Model 7 quantum drive, the same type used in the Axiom of Supremacy. Threx felt his blood run cold. The Axiom of Supremacy, the failed dreadnought that High Command had dumped in the quarantine zone 3 years ago. The ship that was supposed to rust quietly on a primitive world until the end of time. Set course to investigate, he ordered, and prepare a message for Sector Command. Tell them we may have a situation. The patrol ship accelerated toward the energy signature. As they got closer, Threx watched his sensors with growing disbelief. The signature was definitely from a Model 7 drive, but the power readings were all wrong to high, to unstable, to different. And then the ship came into view. It was the Axiom, unmistakably. Threx recognized the distinctive hull shape, the arrangement of weapons ports, the configuration of sensor rays. But it was also not the Axiom. Someone had modified it extensively. The hull was covered with unfamiliar additions, new sensor clusters, additional weapons mounts, strange antenna rays that served no purpose Threx could identify. The running lights were the wrong color, and most disturbingly, the ship was moving under its own power. Open a communication channel. Threx ordered. Standard hailing frequencies. The channel opened. For a long moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through, speaking Velthry, but with a strange accent that Threx had never heard. Velthry Patrol Vessel. This is Colonel Marcus Webb of the Earth Vessel Axiom of Defiance. We are not hostile. Please respond. Threx stared at the communication panel. Earth, the Death World, the Quarantine Zone. This is Sub-Commander Threx of the Velthry Patrol Corps, he said slowly. You are operating a vessel that belongs to the Velthry Dominion. Explain your presence here. Another pause. Then the alien voice came back. With respect, Sub-Commander, we disagree. This vessel was abandoned on our world. Under salvage law, it belongs to whoever recovered it. We recovered it. We repaired it. And now we're flying it. That's impossible. The axiom of supremacy was non-functional. Its systems were beyond repair. Beyond your repair, maybe. Not beyond ours. Threx exchanged glances with his navigation officer. The younger Velthry looked terrified, and Threx could not blame him. Nothing about this situation made sense. The Death Worlders were supposed to be primitive. They were not supposed to be flying Velthry dreadnoughts. I must report this to my superiors. Threx said, You will remain in this location until they decide how to proceed. Negative, Sub-Commander. We're not under your jurisdiction. We'll stay long enough to prove we're not hostile, and then we're going home. You cannot watch us. The channel went dead. Threx watched his sensors as the impossible ship began to move, its engines putting out power levels that should have torn it apart. It was heading back toward the quarantine zone. Toward Earth, sir. His navigation officer said quietly. What do we do? Threx thought about the protocols, the regulations, the chain of command. He thought about what his superiors would say when they learned that the failed dreadnought was now in the hands of Death Worlders. He thought about the political storm that was about to descend on everyone involved. Then he thought about the ship itself. The axiom of supremacy had been the most advanced vessel in the Dominion fleet before its failure. If the Death Worlders had truly made it functional, if they had truly improved it, then the implications were terrifying. Prepare a priority message for Sector Command. He said finally, full encryption, highest classification. Tell them the quarantine zone has been breached. Tell them the Death Worlders have acquired advanced technology. He paused, his forearms tightening at his sides. And tell them to send everyone. The axiom of defiance folded back to Earth space 14 hours later. The second fold was smoother than the first, Yuki, and Oleg had made adjustments to the stabilization systems, but it still left the crew dizzy and disoriented. They emerged near the moon, where a hastily assembled fleet of human vessels was waiting. The fleet consisted of modified satellites, converted cargo ships, and exactly one actual warship, a Russian destroyer, that had been secretly retrofitted for space operations. It was, Yuki reflected, the saddest armada in the history of warfare. But it was theirs. Webb called a meeting of the senior staff as soon as they were in stable orbit. The conference room was crowded, with officers from a dozen nations packed around a table that was too small for all of them. We have a problem, Webb began. The Velthry know we have their ship. They know we can operate it. And based on that patrol commander's reaction, they're not going to let this slide. How long do we have? Asked Admiral Chen, the Chinese representative, unknown. The Velthry have faster-than-light communication. The patrol ship's message has probably already reached their command structure. How quickly they can mobilize a response depends on factors we can't predict. Can we fight them? Webb looked at Yuki. She cleared her throat and stood. The Defiance is now fully operational. Our modifications have increased its firepower by approximately 800% over the original design. In a one-on-one fight, we could probably defeat any single Valkyrie vessel, but they won't send one vessel, Webb added. They'll send a fleet, and against a fleet, we have no chance. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Webb was saying. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had taken a broken alien ship and made it work. But that single ship, no matter how powerful, could not defend an entire planet against a civilization that had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. So what do we do? Asked General Morrison, the American military commander. Webb leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. We build. We prepare. We use every moment we have to make ourselves as strong as possible. And we pray that when the Valkyrie come, we'll be ready. The next 3 months were the busiest in human history. The United Nations declared a planetary emergency. Every factory, every laboratory, every resource on Earth was redirected toward a single goal: survival. The space programs of every nation were combined into a unified organization. Military forces were integrated under joint command. Old enemies became allies overnight. And on the moon, humanity built its first real defenses. Yuki oversaw the construction of orbital weapons platforms, kinetic kill satellites, designed to drop tungsten rods at speeds that could punch through. The Valkyrie fleet moved like a living thing, 40 ships spreading across the void in a formation that had been perfected over millennia of warfare. Each vessel knew its place, its role, its exact function in the deadly dance of space combat. They had destroyed civilizations before. They would destroy this one too, or so Admiral Selvax believed. On the bridge of the Axiom of Defiance, Colonel Webb watched the enemy fleet on the main display. His crew was silent, focused, each person doing their job with the calm efficiency of professionals who knew they were about to die. Time to engagement, he asked. 7 minutes at current approach speed, Lieutenant Park reported. They're forming a standard Valkyrie envelopment pattern. 20 ships on each flank, dreadnought in the center. Predictable. Yes, sir. Very. Webb allowed himself a small smile. The Valkyrie had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. In that time, they had developed perfect tactics, perfect strategies, perfect discipline. Every engagement unfolded according to established doctrine. Every victory followed the expected pattern. But humans did not fight according to patterns. Humans improvised. Humans adapted. Humans did the unexpected. All hands, Webb said over the ship-wide channel. This is the commander. In approximately 6 minutes, we're going to engage the largest military force humanity has ever faced. We are outnumbered 40-1. We have no reinforcements, no backup, no margin for error. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. I'm not going to lie to you. Our chances are not good. But I want you to remember something. 3 years ago, these same Valkyrie threw a ship at our planet and called us garbage. Today, we're flying that ship into battle against them. Whatever happens next, we've already proven them wrong. Another pause. Man your stations. Fight hard, and show them what humans can do. The channel closed. In the engine room, Yuki exchanged a look with Oleg. The old Russian engineer was smiling a fierce, wild expression that she had never seen before. He is a good speaker, Oleg said. Almost makes me believe we will survive. Do you think we will? Oleg shrugged. Survival is optional. Victory is mandatory. These are the terms we work with. He turned back to his console and began running final checks on the full drive. Yuki did the same with her own systems, pushing down the fear that coiled in her stomach. She was not a soldier. She was a scientist. But today, everyone was a soldier. Everyone or no one. The first shots came exactly when expected, a barrage of particle beams from the Valkyrie flanking squadrons. The Defiance's shields flared under the impact, absorbing energy that would have vaporized any human-built vessel. Shields holding, reported the tactical officer. Power draw at 15%. Return fire, Webb ordered. Concentrate on the lead ships of each squadron. The Defiance's weapons spoke not with the elegant precision of Valkyrie particle beams, but with the brutal, overwhelming force of systems that had been pushed far beyond their design limits. The modified cannon punched through Valkyrie shields like paper, coring a patrol corvette from bow to stern. The first Valkyrie vessel died in a ball of expanding plasma. "One down," Webb said quietly. 39 to go. The battle became chaos. The Valkyrie fleet closed in, trying to overwhelm the Defiance with sheer numbers. But the human ship fought like nothing they had ever seen. It did not maintain formation. It did not follow predictable attack patterns. It lunged and twisted and struck from unexpected angles, its modified drive systems allowing maneuvers that should have been impossible. And behind it, Earth's makeshift defense grid joined the fight. The kinetic kill satellites' open-fire tungsten rods accelerated to 30% of light speed, invisible until the moment they struck. A Valkyrie cruiser exploded as a rod the size of a telephone pole punched through its reactor core. Another ship lost its engine section to a perfectly aimed strike. A third took a glancing blow that tore off half its weapons array. "They're firing projectiles," Admiral Selvax shouted on the Valkyrie command channel. "Physical projectiles. Who uses projectiles?" "Humans, apparently," his tactical officer replied grimly. "Their velocity makes them nearly impossible to intercept. Our shields are optimized for energy weapons. They offer minimal protection against kinetic impacts." Selvax cursed in a language older than human civilization. The Death Worlders were not fighting like a civilized species. They were fighting like animals, brutal, vicious, and utterly without regard for the accepted rules of warfare. And they were winning, on the Defiance. Yuki watched the battle unfold through the engine room's secondary display. The Valkyrie were dying 7 ships now, then 8, then 9. But more kept coming, and the Defiance was taking damage, shield power at 60%. She reported to Webb, "We can't sustain this rate of fire much longer." "Understood. Keep us running as long as you can." An explosion rocked the ship. Yuki grabbed a console to steady herself as warning lights flared across the engineering section. "Hull breach, Deck 7, someone shouted. "Emergency containment in effect. Casualties? 3 wounded, 1 dead." Ensign Torres. He was in the breach zone when it went. Yuki closed her eyes for a moment. Torres, 22 years old. Portuguese. He had played guitar in the mess hall on quiet nights. Old Fado songs that made everyone homesick. "Now he was gone. Keep working," she said. Her voice steadied despite the grief that threatened to choke her. "We honor the dead by surviving." The battle raged on. The Defiance killed 3 more Valkyrie ships, but now the enemy was adapting. Their formation tightened, their fire concentrated. They were learning how the human ship fought, and they were adjusting their tactics accordingly. "Admiral Selvax is calling in reinforcements," Lieutenant Park reported from the bridge. "Long-range sensors show 12 additional ships folding in from the outer system." "Where did they come from?" "Unknown. They must have been waiting in reserve." Webb's voice was grim when he responded. "Total enemy count now at 43. Our kill count is at 12. He paused. "We're running out of options." Yuki looked at her console, at the power readings that were slowly dropping, at the damage reports that were slowly mounting. They had done better than anyone expected. They had proven that humans could fight, could kill, could stand against the masters of the galaxy. But it wasn't enough. "Commander," she said slowly, "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." Admiral Selvax watched the battle from his command throne, his 4 hands gripping the armrests with barely controlled fury. The Death Worlders had killed 12 of his ships. 12. In 3,000 years of Valkyrie dominance, no primitive species had ever destroyed a single Dominion vessel. These creatures had killed 12. "Concentrate fire on their engine section," he ordered. "Disable them, then board. I want their engineers alive for interrogation." His fleet moved to comply. The Axiom of Defiance was surrounded now, taking hits from multiple directions. Its shields were failing. Its hull was breached in a dozen places. Victory was moments away. Then Selvax's tactical officer screamed a warning. "Sir, their drive is powering up. They're preparing to fold. They're trying to escape." "In their condition?" "No, sir. The power readings are. They're not consistent with a standard fold. They're overloading the drive." Selvax felt his blood run cold. He understood immediately what the humans were planning. "All ships, emergency scatter. Get clear of that vessel now." But it was too late. On the bridge of the Defiance, Yuki watched the fold drive reach critical power levels. The ship was barely holding together. Half the crew was dead or wounded, but the drive was still functional, still capable of one last desperate act. Fold in 30 seconds, she reported. All systems holding. Webb nodded. His face was pale but calm. All hands, brace for fold. This is going to be rough. Oleg appeared beside Yuki, his face covered in soot and blood from the fires raging throughout the ship. He looked at the drive readings and smiled. You know this might kill us, he said. I know. Good. As long as we understand each other. He patted her shoulder. You are a good engineer, Yuki. Whatever happens, it has been an honor. The honor was mine, Oleg. The fold drive screamed. The defiance vanished from normal space, not in a smooth translation, but in a violent rip that tore at the fabric of reality itself. It reappeared in the exact center of the Valkyrie formation, its overloaded drive releasing every joule of energy it contained. The explosion was not like anything the Valkyrie had ever seen. It was not fire or plasma or radiation. It was a wound-in spacetime itself, a rippling distortion that expanded outward at nearly the speed of light, catching ship after ship in its wake. The affected vessels did not explode. They simply came apart, their hulls separated into component atoms. Their crews ceased to exist between one heartbeat and the next. The quantum disruption tore through the Valkyrie fleet like a scythe through wheat. When the distortion finally faded, 43 Valkyrie ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. And in the center of the devastation, impossibly, the axiom of defiance still existed. Yuki woke to darkness and pain. She was floating. The artificial gravity had failed. Emergency lights cast red shadows across the engine room. Someone was crying nearby. Someone else was screaming orders in Russian. Oleg? She called weakly. Here. His voice came from somewhere to her left. I am alive. Mostly. The ship is less alive. Yuki activated her helmet's display and checked the status readouts. What she saw made her laugh, a broken, disbelieving sound. The hull news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. In every corner of Valkyrie space, in every system controlled by the Dominion, the reports arrived. 43 ships destroyed. Admiral Selvax dead. The Death Worlders victorious. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. It was, nevertheless, true. On the Valkyrie homeworld, High Counselor Verith received the news in her private chambers. She read the report 3 times before she truly understood what it meant. How? She whispered. How did they do this? Her advisor, an elderly strategist named Torval, stood nearby with his forearms folded in contemplation. The preliminary analysis suggests they modified the Axiom's fold drive. They overloaded it deliberately, creating a localized disruption in spacetime. Our fleet was caught in the effect. They used our own technology against us. They improved our technology against us. The original drive would have destroyed itself in such an overload. Somehow, they reinforced it enough to survive. Verith stood and walked to her window. Below, the capital city stretched to the horizon, towers of glass and light, monuments to 3,000 years of Valkyrie supremacy. All of it suddenly seemed very fragile. What do our military advisors recommend? They are divided, High Counselor. Some advocate for immediate retaliation, overwhelming force to crush the humans before they can rebuild. Others suggest caution. The humans have proven more dangerous than anticipated. And what do you recommend, Torval? The old strategist was quiet for a long moment. I recommend, he said finally, that we speak to them, not as conquerors to the conquered, as equals, or at least, as potential equals. Verith turned to stare at him. You suggest we negotiate? With primitives who just destroyed the largest fleet we have deployed in centuries. Yes, High Counselor, I suggest we negotiate, because the alternative is a war we may not win, on Earth. The survivors of the battle were treated as heroes. The Axiom of Defiance limped back to lunar orbit, barely functional, its hull scarred by combat and its crew decimated by losses. But when it arrived, every ship in the makeshift human fleet was waiting to welcome it home. Yuki stood on the bridge as they approached, watching the escort vessels fall into formation around them. Some were military ships, retrofitted for space. Others were converted cargo haulers, mining vessels. Even a few luxury yachts that had been pressed into emergency service. It was, she thought, the most beautiful fleet she had ever seen. Not because it was powerful or elegant or impressive, because it was human. Every ship represented someone who had dropped everything to help defend their world. "We have incoming transmissions from every major government on Earth," Lieutenant Park reported. "They all want to speak to the commander." Webb smiled tiredly. "Tell them I'll talk to everyone after we've docked. Right now, we have wounded to evacuate and dead to honor." The next few days were a blur of activity. The wounded were transferred to medical facilities on the moon. The dead were recovered, identified, and prepared for memorial services. The Defiance itself was towed into a repair dock, where teams of engineers immediately began the long process of restoring it to functionality. 44 people had died in the battle. 44 names that would be carved into monuments, taught in schools, remembered for generations. They were the first humans to die in interstellar war, and Earth swore they would not be the last casualties in vain. The memorial service was held on the lunar surface, in a domed amphitheater that had been built specifically for the occasion. Representatives from every nation attended. The ceremony was broadcast worldwide, watched by billions of people who understood, perhaps for the first time, what humanity had accomplished. Colonel Webb delivered the eulogy. "These 44 people," he said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber, "did not die for any single nation or ideology. They died for humanity, for the simple belief that our species deserves to exist, to grow, to reach the stars." He paused, looking out at the assembled mourners. 3 years ago, an alien civilization threw their garbage on our world and expected us to die quietly. We did not die. We took their garbage and turned it into a weapon. And when they came to punish us for our audacity, we stood our ground. His voice grew stronger. "Today, we honor those who gave everything so that we could stand here. Tomorrow, we continue their work. We build more ships. We develop new technologies. We prepare for whatever comes next, because this is not the end. This is the beginning." He raised his hand in salute. "To the fallen, to humanity, to the future we will build together." 2 months after the battle, the first Velthri diplomatic ship arrived in the solar system. It came alone, broadcasting signals of peaceful intent on every frequency. It carried no weapons, no military personnel, only a single ambassador named Threx, the same patrol commander who had first discovered the modified axiom. Webb met him in a conference room on the lunar base. The two beings studied each other across the table, one human, one Velthri, representatives of species that had just finished killing each other. "You surprise me, Colonel," Threx said. His voice was translated by a device attached to his collar, rendering his words in flat, emotionless English. "I expected more hostility." "We're not hostile," Webb replied. "We're cautious. There's a difference." "Indeed." Threx's silver eyes studied the human with obvious curiosity. "I have been sent to propose negotiations. My government believes that continued conflict would be costly. Costly for both sides." "Yes. You destroyed 43 of our ships. We estimate you lost half your defenders. Neither of us can afford many more such victories." Webb nodded slowly. It was true. The Defiance was still in repair dock. The defense grid had expended most of its ammunition. If the Velthri had sent another fleet immediately, Earth would have fallen. "What does your government propose?" Threx produced a data pad and slid it across the table. "A cessation of hostilities, recognition of human sovereignty over your solar system, limited trade agreements, cultural exchange programs." He paused. "In exchange, you agree not to share your modifications to our technology with other species. You're afraid we'll arm your enemies. We are afraid you will upset the balance of power that has maintained galactic stability for 3 millennia. "Yes." Webb picked up the data pad and scrolled through the terms. They were not unreasonable. They were, in fact, remarkably generous, considering the Velthri had started this conflict by dumping a derelict ship on Earth without permission. But something bothered him. "Why now?" he asked. "Your high command must be furious about what happened. Why negotiate instead of seeking revenge?" Threx was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, less formal, more personal. Because we are not fools. Colonel, we have watched the recording of the battle many times. We have analyzed your tactics, your modifications, your technology, and we have reached a conclusion that our leadership finds uncomfortable, which is, you are better than us. Webb blinked. I'm sorry, not better in all things, Threx clarified. Our civilization is older. Our technology is more advanced. Our territory is vaster. But in one crucial area, you surpass us completely. And what area is that? Adaptation? Threx leaned forward, his forearms spreading in what might have been a gesture of emphasis. We built the axiom of supremacy and declared it a failure because it did not work as designed. You rebuilt it and made it work better than we ever imagined. We sent our best fleet against you and followed our established tactics. You improvised, innovated, and destroyed us. He sat back. The Velthari Dominion has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years by being superior. But superiority means nothing against a species that refuses to accept its place. In the natural order, you do not compete within our system. You change the system itself. That is something we have never faced before. Webb considered this for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to smile. So you're negotiating because you're scared. We are negotiating because we are wise enough to recognize a threat. We cannot defeat through conventional means. Yes, Colonel, we are scared. And that is something we have not been in a very long time. The treaty was signed 3 months later, in a ceremony broadcast across both human and Velthari networks. It was not everything humanity wanted. There were restrictions on their expansion, limits on their technology sharing, requirements that they operate within certain boundaries. But it was also more than anyone had expected. The Velthari recognized humanity as a sovereign species. They opened limited trade relations. They invited human observers to their scientific academies. For the first time in history, humanity was not alone. Yuki watched the signing ceremony from the observation deck of the Axiom of Defiance, now fully repaired and upgraded with new systems that combined human and Velthari technology. The ship gleamed in the light of the sun, stronger than ever. A symbol of everything humanity had achieved. Oleg appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and leaned against the railing, looking out at the stars. Strange days, he said. 3 years ago, we were primitive creatures on a forgotten world. Now we sign treaties with the masters of the galaxy. Strange days, Yuki agreed. What do you think happens next? Oleg shrugged. We